Hey, hey, 1, 2. 1, 2.
Going up and
Hello, everyone.
My name is Emily Bullock, and I work in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion as a professional support staff. And I want to start off this program by acknowledging the land in which we are holding this conversation. We honor the original people, the Anishinaabe, the Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples. We recognize Grand Rapids Community College is located on the land ceded to the United States in the Chicago Treaty of 1821. We also recognize the Grand Rivers Bands of Ottawa Indians as the descendants of the original tribes represented at this treaty signing. We express our gratitude to the peoples, past, present, and future, who have and will continue to steward this land throughout generations. We understand this acknowledgement must be coupled with a relationship with advocacy and support for Indigenous peoples. This serves as a responsibility for an exposition of ongoing commitments towards Indigenous communities. We know offering this land acknowledgement affirms Indigenous sovereignty, and our efforts will aim to hold Grand Rapids Community College more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous people. Thank you all for joining us today for this important conversation, and thank you to our panelists, our facilitator, and our partners from the Nottawasepi Huron Band of the Potawatomi for their participation today and also their consultation leading up to the event. Rather than having a designated Q&A section for today's panel, we'll be asking questions throughout today's program. So our facilitator, Lisa Carlson, will ask 2 prepared questions we have, and then I will be asking a question from the audience. So if you have a question that you would like to submit, please do so using either by scanning the QR code provided, or you can go to slido.com and enter the code 4050954. Thank you, and we are going to get started.
Ani boju wabshka memengwan indigenous Odawa kwe endao mashikan indonum waganakasing Odawa LTBB indigenous Gagan wadvan non indada minwa non mitna she nanan non sabunagus mi dumuya indao Nangwa ndomapi me ndo miigwech. And so that's my Anishinaabemowin Odawa language. And I said, hello, greetings. My name is White Butterfly. I am an Odawa woman. I'm Turtle Clan. I belong to the people of the Crooked Tree, Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa. I live in Grand Rapids. I'm 55 winters old, and I'm an elder woman. I am thankful that we are all here today. End of translation. I work at GRCC as a part-time support professional for the workforce training department at the MTech building, and I just work there Mondays and Wednesdays. I'm currently enrolled as a full-time student online with classes at Bay Mills Community College, earning an AA in early childhood education. And so if our other panelists here would please introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, how you are connected to GRCC, and include some ways, oh, I forgot that part, in some ways that you honor your Indigenous heritage. For me, it's learning my Anishinaabemowin language, also dancing in powwow, I dance jingle dress, and both those things are whitewashed in some ways just by the language being taken away and with the ceremonies taken away that are part of powwow. So as you introduce yourself, please include some ways you honor your Indigenous heritage and include if you have seen these practices whitewashed or exploited.
Go down the row.
Miigwech.
Hi, my name is Tari Noilani Maddox. I am a professor here at GRCC. I teach geology. I honor my heritage and immerse myself in my heritage through hula, but also through the work I do as an Indigenous educator and scientist. Of those, obviously, hula is probably the most whitewashed. It has been heavily whitewashed to make it palatable to colonizers. It's also been exploited as kitschy entertainment, when in reality it's an important art form that has very deep roots in our traditions, and it's how we preserve our language and our culture and communicate our stories and feelings.
Hi everyone, my name is Samira Kimo. I'm a career coach at the MTech building. So I work with the One Workforce Grant and advanced manufacturing students. So I am originally born and raised in Grand Rapids, but both my parents come from Ethiopia. They're both immigrants from Ethiopia, and one way that I uplift and uphold my heritage is by just speaking my language. I speak the Afan Oromo language, and that language was banned in Ethiopia until 1991, and that was a way to oppress the Oromo people and to not allow them to fully be liberated. So that's one way that I do that.
Ani minang tijep Andrea Riley Makabet Indigenous Dashkin Zibi Anishinaabe Kajijak Nodom Wayat Donjaba. My name's Andrea. I am a citizen of the Chippewa of Thames First Nation. I'm Crane Clan. I'm originally from the Metro Detroit area, but I live here now in Grand Rapids. I am the community engagement manager for the city of Grand Rapids. And what else am I going to say? Oh, how I honor my Indigenous heritage. Well, lots of ways. Also a language learner. And I'm really invested in foraging and harvesting and thinking about mindful Anishinaabe ways of being in the land and on and with the land. I'm also a writer and a researcher. So before I was working for the city, I was an associate professor for Grand Valley State University. I have a PhD in rhetoric and writing with a focus in working with and for and writing about Michigan Indigenous people. So all of those ways have been exploited or whitewashed or culturally appropriated, especially thinking about the ways that academia has appropriated, stolen, and taken our stories and told them in ways that serve settler colonial narratives. So my role has been to tell those stories in our language and on our term and from our perspectives.
Miigwech. I have permission to offer smudging here and share smudging with the panelists. So it's one of our 4 sacred medicines, sage, shkorawabuk. We also have tobacco, sema, cedar, which is kijik, and sweetgrass, weengosh. So this is I hope this, if you're nervous, I hope this puts you at ease a little. So this is for a cleansing. If you go to a powwow, if you attend a powwow circle, this is gonna be a familiar smell, and it really, like I said, it helps ease the tension. This is something that's been whitewashed and appropriated in some ways as well. You just want to wash it over yourself. Miigwech. Oh. And miigwech for allowing that practice here. All right, so let's begin. Panelists answering question number 1, myself and Terry will be handling this one. Question 1, in your own words, what is whitewashing and how do you see it affect your own culture? I can begin with what I have prepared here. My definition of whitewashing really includes the words in the actual dictionary definition. So whitewashing is deliberately attempt to conceal unpleasant or incriminating facts about someone or something. And similar words are cover up, suppress, conceal, obscure, gloss over, downplay, make light of, minimize, de-emphasize. And so whitewashing affects my Anishinaabe culture by just denying the history of trauma and genocide brought upon the Native peoples of Turtle Island. And in this age of fact finding at our fingertips, that was hard to say. It's easy just to look up whatever. For me, typing what history is not taught in high school U.S. history books. And a BuzzFeed report popped up for more in 2021, reported 17 specific events not published in U.S. history books. And among the 17 were to do with the Native American smallpox epidemic and the role of Native American code talkers in World War I and World War II. It's not in the books. And then there were 15 other events in that particular article that were not talked about. And the list included massacres, unsung heroes, revolutions, and uprising, and each one having to do with non-white people. And so not being recognized and just being whitewashed, covered up. And so I think even referring to current citizens in the U.S. as being white is whitewashing. If you refer to a person as white, it's denying their European roots as a fair-complected person from Ireland, Germany, France, Poland, to name a few. So with the lack of truth from the past, the Anishinaabe people of the 21st century send up our voices and say, we are still here because it is difficult to be seen or taken seriously when whitewashing has made your whole culture a thing of the past and makes it seem like your relatives never existed in the first place. Gary?
So whitewashing to me is a practice that diminishes and trivializes Indigenous knowledge and experience as well as Indigenous communities. It's a method that focuses on what colonizers found least liked and found least offensive, and then it rejects everything that challenges their authority or worldview. And I think that its goals are diverse. At its least, it's a desire to minimize white discomfort, and at its worst, it's the desire to erase Indigenous identity and to avoid any possibility of revolution, reparations, or acknowledgement of fault and error.
And if any of our other panelists wanted to chime in at any time, that's perfectly acceptable as well. Should I go on to the next?
I would like to add something.
Please do.
Just another kind of like fact about Ethiopia is it's one of the countries in Africa that they claim was never colonized, but it has significant like colonial effects. So the word Ethiopia comes from a Greek word that means burnt skin. So it's a way for like the Ethiopians to kind of unify us and label us under one identity when there are multiple different ethnic groups in Ethiopia, and we all have different languages and share different cultures and dances, and yeah, that was just another way where they whitewashed us and kind of made us assimilate into one instead of our differences. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would also add too, excuse me, that it's just the general idea of like who has culture. And so when we think about people from dominant perspectives or European-based ancestries who have now like settled into Turtle Island, those folks have been persuaded that they don't have culture, right? And that's because they're the dominant culture. And that for those of us who have culture, our culture is often fetishized or, you know, exoticized or tokenized. And it becomes the spice or the interesting thing that then wants to be appreciated or appropriated and consumed. And I think about this a lot with my own children. I have a 7 and a 9-year-old, and just the amount of effort to make sure that they understand who they are and where they come from now. And then also helping them battle the dominant narratives they're told every day as well, I think is a part of that whitewashing.
Which? We'll move on to question 2 for panelist Samira, and I'll chime in myself as well. Question 2, what are examples of whitewashing that you see happening in everyday life or on the GRCC campus?
Okay, so during a recent panel discussion, it was called A Century of, I think, Tension. It was on the Palestine-Israel conflict. A GRCC instructor used examples from American history to relate it to the creation of modern-day Israel. This included displaying an image of a Native American chief, referring to him as a savage, as well as making despairing remarks about immigrants. So the concept of American exceptionalism, which holds that the United States is morally superior to others or may influence countries like Israel in how they perceive themselves. However, it's important to recognize the historical context of the United States, including the genocide of Native Americans and the displacement of indigenous people and the exploitation of their resources. So similar to the Native Americans, the indigenous people of Palestine are Palestinian people. But sadly, most countries like America don't recognize Palestine. They only recognize Israel as a state. The whitewashing of Palestinians refers to the process of downplaying or ignoring the Palestinian narrative and negative aspects of Israeli history and actions. So the instructor's comments, even if perceived as someone else's viewpoints, reflects a narrow and nationalistic perspective. They also perpetuate the harmful practice of whitewashing history, which involves downplaying and ignoring negative aspects of the past, particularly those related to race and colonialism. And it's crucial to engage in open and honest discussions about historical events, even those that are uncomfortable or difficult to confront, because by acknowledging the complexities of the past, we can move forward with more information and just an understanding of the presence. One thing I've noticed is that just acknowledging that indigenous people and Native people exist is like a little step that you can take, but it's a powerful step. A lot of indigenous people just want to be seen and heard, and we want people to realize, we exist, we matter. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you.
I absolutely, thank you. That's well prepared. I agree with the fact that, especially in an educational forum, as colleges, as schools, from little on, that truth needs to be there, because that's why I'm in early childhood education, because and also partnered with Bay Mills, because they do have an Indigenous platform for their school, and just to hear those conversations, I think when like I said, there's easy access to modern knowledge, that we just can't go on in those whitewashed hush up kind of ways. And so I think that that's very important, that as an educator, that that's part of your curriculum, is to recognize, and if you're presenting it as this is what has been taught, we would like to teach this now. I think that's an important step right there, as far as acknowledging. Did anyone else have something to
Yeah, just generally, and kind of segueing off of you is obviously there's a great ignorance and even banning of teaching, our history and the history of colonization, but also just ignorance of the contributions of Indigenous academics, and a lot of the material we use, from the text to the narrative that we learned when we were going through school, it really highlights the accomplishments of white males, particularly in my field of science. And I catch myself saying, this was first acknowledged, or and naming the scientist, and realizing that no, this was just the first person within this context that was acknowledged, and not necessarily the first person to ever observe or define the phenomenon. It's the same with women in science, as well as I think Indigenous scientists and Indigenous knowledge that contributed to science.
language?
So now we have our first audience questions.
Bonjour. Annie.
Can't hear.
The mic isn't on.
Yeah.
Hello? Cool.
Yay.
First audience question.
Hello again. My name is Cherry Gałaszewski. Sorry if my speech is a little difficult. I had a bad accent. I'm just bouncing back. I'm half Iroquois, half Polish American. My question for you is, and I also like to thank you for trying to preserve the language. It's something that's in our culture is really disappearing and shrinking. And I think there should be more workshops or a lot more level of exposure so people that even non-natives can learn the language or at least, be exposed to it. My question is, in Maine, there was a lot of tragedy and I believe the downright criminality of natives, children being taken from their families. I don't know if you're aware of that, and being put in foster care. And it's happened in other states too. And that was the cruelest form of whitewashing I can imagine. Of course, there's other atrocities that, that have occurred throughout the years. I guess my follow-up question is, what is, do you know, because you're at the forefront, is being done for Native American rights? And do you see that the trend moving forward, which looks like a positive thing, where the derogatory terms like Redskins are no longer part of, sports organizations or other names like that really, are pretty racist, obviously racist. That's all I have. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Miigwech. So I can speak a little to the foster care system. I think that's what you began with, and I was adopted by a non-native couple. So I was raised by a Dutch woman and a Hungarian man, and the Catholic Social Services matched us up because my adopted dad had dark hair and dark eyes. And when they decided they wanted to adopt because they couldn't have children of their own, and they called the agency, they said, "We want an Indian baby. We don't care, boy or girl. We just really like the Indians. We'd like to have an Indian baby." So, order up. They got me. And, I was raised actually in Holland, Michigan, and talking a little about mascots. I went to Holland High School, and we were the marching Dutchmen. I was in band, so we were the Dutchmen. So they were saying, if you're not Dutch, you're not much, and those kinds of things. Oh my gosh. So fast forwarding a little bit to being a teenager and graduated from high school. I moved to Grand Rapids in 1986, and I stayed here. And while I was here, I found my birth family. So. That opened all new doors. I think that there's a need or a call for those that were adopted. You've heard of the 60s scoop and all those things. There's still 2 of my sisters that were released for adoption that we've never met. So to me, it was a huge step in connecting with my culture, where my own adopted mom shamed me for having long hair. And my 5th grade picture, I had it long like this, and I remember saying, she's like, oh, that doesn't do anything for you. We need to get that cut. And then it was cut and permed, and just those cultural points are lost. So I think, yeah, exactly. And to them, it was just the romanticized, oh, we have this Indian baby, So I think that it's important for the establishments that have conducted those kinds of adoptions and those relationships, that they open up and start to help people connect with that culture. Did you have anything to add with that?
Yeah, can I add a few things?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to speak specifically to the question and observations around activism, but first I wanted to share a resource. So you were talking about the social workers in Maine, and so there's a documentary called Dawnland, Dawnland. And so for those of you who haven't seen it, it's an excellent and very difficult documentary, and it really gets into truth, then reconciliation. And so the children who were put into white families, they counter and address that with those social workers as a way to talk about the experiences before the Indian Child Welfare Act and how that impacted them and how it still does today. And so for those of you who are thinking about curriculum or having conversations about ICWA, that's a very good documentary to share and talk about, and there's actually a reading guide alongside of it. But I would say that something like when we look at policies like ICWA, if we look at even the federal boarding school initiative that Zev Halen is doing right now, those all came from grassroots Indigenous activism practices by our elders and our aunties and our uncles and our community members. So I think about the demonstrations, I think about the American Indian movement, I think about with the murdered and missing Indigenous women that then became, including Two-Spirit people, men and children. That was an art installation that began in First Nations territory called Walking with Our Sisters. And, you know, we'll talk about the Indian Arts and Crafts Act later on, but all of those are examples. When we look at those policies, those are contributions from our communities who said, this is not right, this is inappropriate, we need to stand up for this. So I just encourage you that when you look at those policies and practices to know that those are real life examples of Indigenous people making impact at a federal or state level.
Miigwech. Looks like we have Mariah joined us.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. We could pause, please, and take a moment to introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bonjour, Mariah Indigenous, Mashiki Indodom, Pokagon, Potawatomi and Dow. So my name is Mariah Williams. I am Potawatomi Pokagon, and I'm Turtle Clan. And I am very pleased to be an invited guest here today. I see that we have just finished our first audience question.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And so moving on to question 3, our panelists are Andrea and Terry. Question 3, when you were a student, what were some ways you saw the history of your culture being changed, altered, or erased altogether?
It's been a long time since I was a student, so that's why I wanted to share this one, because I'm hoping that there can be some ways of addressing even a little bit of the change of having multiple faculty and support staff at this table from Indigenous representation. So when I was a student, it was very difficult to find anybody who was a Native person on campus. And there was even still feelings of shame and embarrassment about even being out as a Native person. So I remember working on my dissertation, and I was sitting in the yard with my dad and aunties who were all born in the 40s and the 50s, so they're elder age now, and they were surprised and concerned that I was writing about Native people as a Native person, because they came from a perspective where they felt they still had to hide and not share where they came from. And that was a lesson that they encouraged me to have my entire childhood. So when we had things like Culture Day, for example, I think is a really good example of thinking about how we whitewash history, or going back to how we use culture as a way to fetishize or tokenize, right? And so I wanted to come in with my cultural dishes and talk about who I was or where I came from, but my parents were so scared of that happening. And that's just one example, but also we didn't read books by Native people in classes, and if we did, it was Louise Erdrich. And Louise Erdrich is incredible. There's no disrespect to her. But again, it's that idea of exemplifying one Native author to speak for all Native people. And in those moments, the professor, and so like, I would say, oh, I'm a Anishinaabe, I'm Native. And then the professor would direct towards me to say, well, can you tell us about all of this, right? And we all know that it's a really hard and difficult task to then speak for an entire culture, especially if you come from residential boarding school family and impact, like my grandfather and my elders before that. And so if I couldn't answer those questions, then I felt this sense of shame that I was not actually Native enough to even answer basic history questions. But of course, how would I be able to do that if I came from a family who struggled to understand their own education and it wasn't being taught in schools as well, or if it was taught from a settler perspective?
Glitch.
I think one way that I noticed my culture was being erased or changed was kind of when I was in high school and I was learning more about my culture. I realized that a lot of Oromo people in Ethiopia were not allowed to go to school because of their name, for having an Oromo name. Like just having like a bunch of friends just tell me about their parents' experiences and having to alter their names to a more Ethiopian sounding name because it was more acceptable in Ethiopia. So just like being thankful for the opportunity to like learn about that and just know where my parents come from and what they experienced going to school, and being able to like just speak about it and be able to go to school myself and in America where there's more opportunities and more ways to just become educated and to share the truth.
Miigwech. And all right, so question 4 for panelists Terry, Mariah, and Andrea. How can GRCC or other institutions avoid using outdated and whitewashed methods and sources when teaching history?
So I think this really applies to all disciplines, not just history, science, health. If you're in a health profession, whatever you teach, I think it's really important to research Indigenous stories, particularly if you're teaching about a certain region. Research Indigenous stories and knowledge, because while it's rarely acknowledged, modern knowledge rests on a foundation of Indigenous knowledge. It just couldn't have happened without Indigenous knowledge. And so I think it's important to research what were some of the first stories about this. I always like to tell my students that the very first volcanologists in Hawaii were Hawaiians. They were amazing observers of nature. They interpreted what was going on in front of them, and that's reflected in their dance, in their songs, in their chants, and in their stories that they handed down. And so that's a treasure that we can share with our students, so that they can see how truth is built, how true knowledge is built from the foundation, from the Indigenous foundation.
Mariah, did you have some input?
Yeah, I respectfully speaking, I'd just like to say even the verbiage used in this question refers to just the teaching of history. We're not just historical, we're living peoples and nations here today, and we're current and relevant. So I would just like to point that out, that institutions do tend to historically categorize us through anthropology and history, and that's just not the whole story. So to capture the whole story, you need to look at the relevance of where you're at, the place where you're at currently, their surrounding areas, and then let that echo out with those stories and the beginnings of how nature and culture was established in the places where you're at. So we're relevant today.
Miigwech.
I'm really glad that you had said that, because that was something that I was thinking about, was how do we think about history as past, present, future, or all topics as past, present, future in a cyclical and interconnected way? And so when I was when I was a professor and when I was developing content and working with faculty and staff, I would often have them think about how they can approach any topic and beginning by thinking, let the beginning be an Indigenous framework, you know, and then what happens when, like you had said, Mariah, we honor the people, we think about our location, we think about our contributions, and then weave that in where it doesn't have to feel like time is a linear Western, like we begin in one period and then we end up here. And I also think it's about the kind and how we want to tell our stories. So often, and Terry, it makes me think about what you were saying earlier, like there's a hero in how we tell history, right? And it's often like a cis white man. But what if that's not the kind of way that we tell stories or talk about contributions? So when we think about Indigenous paradigms or frameworks, they're community contributions. It's a collectiveness. And so I think even thinking about that kind of methodology of how we're teaching about collaboration. So I was a writing professor for many years, and even thinking about how we take care of each other or do community practices. How can we learn from those models to do things like writing grants, public administration, developing a business proposal? We can take our contributions and our intellect and apply it to things that we're doing today, like you're talking about, because we're still doing that. We have Indigenous businesses, we have Indigenous teachers, we have people working at all levels of Turtle Island in many ways, and those are contributions right there. We just have to see them as valuable ways to learn from them and listen to them as well.
Yeah. Just to kind of round out what Andrea was saying, that in academia, it's usually a linear model. You start and you move through and you end. But with Indigenous thinking, it's a cyclical.
I like cyclical,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
whatever you said is good.
Thank you. And that's the medicine wheel, and it's where all of those components touch and everything overlaps, and things at the beginning can also influence the middle and the end. So I believe that's kind of what you're speaking about too, is there's overlap and how we sync up our ideas of thinking, learning, and knowing.
Language.
All right, now we have our next audience question, so anyone can answer. Next week is Thanksgiving. Is this tradition problematic? What are some ways our viewers can be more respectful and purposeful if they choose to celebrate next week?
I definitely I prepared something to say about that, so yeah, Thanksgiving is definitely a product of whitewashing, and that whole history, the lack of truth, is what keeps perpetuating the fantasy of the first Thanksgiving, and still being taught in U.S. Schools, history books, just from those little ones on, I suppose, and the inaccuracies and omittance of killing Indigenous Wampanoag peoples. It's not there, and so once again, it's an instant find that dark side. The stories, the true stories are out there. They're written by survivors and handed down. That's another thing I think a stumbling block for the Anishinaabe and for Native peoples is not having that written language, and a lot of the culture that's taught is from that timeline where the Europeans started writing things down. Well, all of ours was oral tradition, like you said. That's what we do with our gatherings and our powwows, our dance, and our storytelling is an oral tradition. And so, because we didn't have those late written histories, then the fact becomes this is when it was written down. But I definitely think that there needs to be a truth that comes with that. There was an article in the Business Insider reported in 2022 which says teachers, professors, and Native Americans told the New York Times in 2020 that they're rethinking the holiday that has marginalized U.S.'s violence and cruelty against Native Americans. And And my suggestion, for the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, this is harvest feast time. This is a time where we host ghost suppers, and so I think if we're gathering, in a ghost supper, you do this in remembrance of someone who's walked on, who's passed away, and so you bring to the table one of their favorite foods, that they enjoyed, and you're gathering, in the spirit that they're still with you, and you're just being thankful. Yes, that is a great thing. Our whole culture is about giving thanks for, the smallest blade of grass and the birds and all the sky world, all of those things. So that it's not bad to be thankful, of course, but I think, there is that power to knowing the stories that are being taught are not, in the truth realm, and it's just time for those little Pilgrim and Indian figurines to be put away and start to learn some new traditions, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Do you have some things to add?
Yeah, I was going to add too, I was really grateful, Lisa, that you brought up harvest and feast time, because I feel like that's really important. And so to understand that, Thanksgiving is a federal holiday that was developed and advocated for by a white woman to Abraham Lincoln at a certain time frame to provide a story around unification. And how they wanted to tell the story of unification was a celebration of genocide, right? And so for me, I am someone who thinks it's very important for settlers to dwell in the discomfort of those stories. And so to me, the idea of celebrate is the contentious part, right? I believe it's important to feast. I believe it's important to give thanks. I believe it's important to honor our ancestors and prepare for the future and take care of our young ones and our elders. And also to understand take that day to understand where we're coming from and where we're going. Some groups call this our National Day of Mourning as well, and I think that's one way to approach this. I also wanted to share, a couple of years ago, NPR had interviewed me on how to teach about Thanksgiving, and so you can access that interview online. But I'm sharing that primarily because that was about educators and about working with children. And I think that so often there is this idea that we have to protect children from difficult and harmful stories. And one of the things that I had said is that our children, especially our children from historically oppressed and resilient communities, we already experience that violence, we know that violence, and so who are we protecting? We're protecting teachers, or we're protecting parents. And so instead we have to, in a sense, lean in to telling those difficult conversations, because our children already know them and live them, and we have to guide them on how to respond to them. And so I just want to add that as well.
Oh, miigwech. All right. Thank you for that question. So we're on to our panelists, Terry, Mariah, and Andrea, for question number 5. Many people have an outdated understanding of many indigenous cultures. Can you share examples of authors, artists, filmmakers, etc., that show your culture in a modern light?
Well, there's so many. So I just want to highlight one. I think a lot of our artists do work that is holistic, almost going back to what Mariah was saying about the circle. I think that's really natural for us because we recognize that you cannot address one thing without addressing the other. And so a really good example of this is the Edith Kanakaole Foundation, which is founded on the legacy of a national living treasure for Hawaii and for this nation. Edith Kanakaole, who was a kumuhula, hula master, and chanter. And she and her descendants are widely acknowledged as preservers of not only hula and chant, but also mele. And their foundation that they grew as a ohana, as a family, perpetuates and grows our culture through art, through literature, through education and community projects. They spend time not only producing all these wonderful resources, but also preserving our land. They do community projects where they go in and they have held on to tracts of land, and they work it in traditional ways and invite volunteers to come and preserve it, not only the land, but also our people, and help grow our communities. So yeah, I just wanted to share that one.
So I would like to let you guys know that there is a body of researchers out there that is active, relevant, breaking down walls, busting through ceilings, and they're all Indigenous. They're in academia, they are thriving, and they are relating their historical context to the relevance of today's academia and teaching. And that spreads to the students, which spreads to the greater community. So I really love Kadasawewen, which is by Kathleen Epsilon. That is a research manual talking about how we relate our Indigenous practices to our academic research, and how you, as an Indigenous person, can't separate yourself from that type of work. It's embedded in who you are, but the academic standard doesn't fit who we are as Indigenous people. We're not anonymous, we're communal, and we're related to our people. So writing with quotes and those sources don't always work for us. So I appreciate that body of work that is now out there and present. I also, when I was here at GRCC as an employee, I used Beyond the Asterisk by Heather J. Sutton and Associates. That was a book I held near and dear, and I still do. It speaks of Native communities and how we are outside of the parameters of research. If you look at statistics, it says we're not graduating, and we're not within those defined parameters. We are a few years later because we prioritize family and taking care of community. And a part of our education is also a part of educating and bringing what we learn back to our families as well. So those are the things that interest me right now currently with media and in the academic world and books.
Yeah, there's just so many. And I think, so an artist I really like is named Christy Belcourt. She's Métis, and she does this really beautiful large-scale mural work. And then she does it by dot painting, so it replicates what a seed bead kind of looks like beadwork. And of course, like local hero, like Shane McSoby, of course, right? But I think what I wanted to say about this question specifically is that to be curious about the kinds of content you consume. And so to think about, my auntie once said to me when we were working on a project together that the best stories are success stories. And I feel like so often there's this expectation for Indigenous people to have to tell the hardest parts of our stories. So there's a great book I love by Therese Malhote called Heartberries, but that's a gut-wrenching book. It's gut-wrenching. It's so hard to get through. But what I love are when Indigenous creators create things that are funny or weird or today or consume in pop culture. And so when we start thinking about that consumption of media or art, to know that we are, again, just like everybody else, watching TV, going shopping, hitting the mall. Exactly, right? And so those things, when we think about authenticity, we're still here today, and so that content should represent that in many ways.
Language. And just real quick, I did used to do, I called it powwow presentations when my daughters were young and we were learning, and we are, I think it was mentioned before, if you're, from a boarding school, family, and that culture has been suppressed, then it's harder. You're always learning, having been adopted, my learning started when I met my my birth mother in 1989. So I'm like, I'm really that old as far as learning what's happening, but I taught the elementary school age children, I'm like, we're still here. I would show them, I'm like, we are doctors, we are, and I show them pictures of our tribal newsletter. I'm like, here's an Indigenous police officer, so I wanted to, make sure that they didn't just have those little images of those little figurines going around in their heads about that Thanksgiving story and all of that, and just to let them know we're here right now, and also emphasize the language, because you can go and learn how to speak French or German or Latin, and those are all taught widely, in schools. But the Anishinaabemowin and all of the individual languages that our Native people, Indigenous people have, it's something that we preserve for ourselves, and for our community. So I think that's important. As a current thing. So let's see. Question 6 for Mariah, and Andrea can chime in. This is also for me. What are your thoughts on individuals capitalizing off the false pretense of being a part of the Native community? Are there ways for people to educate themselves in order to be more aware of these types of instances? Let's begin with Mariah. Did you have...
Yeah, this is such a relevant, hot topic right now. Just coming into this season, we've had several people who have long represented the Native community in pop culture and in the wider frame of the world, and have been found out to not be Indigenous, and having capitalized off of that and done very well for themselves. And it's egregious, and it's heartbreaking, but it's not surprising. It is not surprising. My mom always taught me that you are what everyone's gonna say they are and wanna be. You are truly Indigenous, you are truly Native, but you're gonna meet a ton of people out there who are gonna tell you that they are and they're not. Because people wanna have that connection. People want to belong, and we belong to a beautiful culture and incredible lands. This is our home territory. And so to see the deeper effects and the quakes of the reckoning that's going to happen, is going to be tribal people and tribal nations standing up, taking account of who their people are, which is in itself, that's a very American thing to do, right? Be counted like a census. But that's what we have to do. That's the corner we've been forced in, and it's unfortunate. So this is a relevant topic.
Andrea and I talked a little bit about this before we began, and I said also it brings to mind, because it says capitalizing and those merchandising ways. It was brought up about like team mascots and all the logos and those things, and I've kind of fought that battle with Saugatuck High School being the Indians, and so I was kind of part of the push to be like, let's change that, and went to the principal, went to the superintendent. I'm like, this is a hurtful part of the Indigenous people, and it turned out that the artist himself, John Fox, said, yeah, I've been trying for 15 years to get them to take that down and change that, and we brought Julie Dye on board to talk to the board there, and the decision was made to take that down. But it took a lot of doing, and it's that merchandising, and we also talked about art and like the knockoff art that is Native passing, and so bring you into my shop because I have these things, but what's the meaning behind them if they're just there as merchandising and trinkets? So everything that we wear in our regalia has a true meaning. It's a gift. It's something we've made. It's something a grandparent, an auntie, uncle. All those things have meaning. So just to trivialize them, I think that's a danger that we need to be aware of, and just check the resources. I think Andrea mentioned the Arts and Crafts Act of
1990.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say too is like just kind of being very mindful about why you're purchasing things and where you're purchasing things, So again, when we think about cultural appreciation, it's mutually beneficial, right? It's about not trying to show that one is like very cool with all their like, exotic clothes or interesting jewelry, right? I think it's this, again, this desire to, if you've been convinced you don't have a culture, then one must consume another culture. And that comes back, like Vine Deloria Jr.'s book, Plain Indian, where it's this idea of thinking that if we dress in a certain way, then we can put on or take off a culture. And so, like, I was at Old Navy the other day buying my 9-year-old jeans, and I'm just like, there's beaded earrings in the stack, right? And so I know that those are cute earrings, but I'm not going to buy those beaded seed bead earrings because they come from fast fashion. It's a form of cultural appropriation. It doesn't go to an Indigenous person. And so being mindful of both why and from whom you're purchasing from. And I would also say, too, in response to like what Mariah is talking about, is that this is a very complicated topic, right? Like, there are people who have been adopted, there are people who've had belonging provided to them, and so understanding that for Indigenous people, you know, what Mariah is talking about being backed into the corner, the whole idea of sovereignty or federal recognition or blood quantum, those were creations by the settler state to make us fight each other and engage in lateral oppression, and then to make these hard decisions. And so I never fault people for having to make those decisions, because that comes from their culturally specific community and from their elders and teachers. And also understanding that, again, that desire, you know, we have, like, there are people who grow up being told that they're one thing or another, but it's also their responsibility to understand and follow that through. It's their responsibility to find out how to be a part of the community, how to be invited in, to practice those ways. We can't just take it off and put it back on. There's a really great episode of Reservation Dogs that addresses this topic in a really, I think, sophisticated way.
All right, so we had a couple more audience questions come in, but they're pretty much answered by what was said up here, and unfortunately that is our time, and I want to respect that. So thank you all again for participating. Thank you all for being here and listening to the conversation. I have a feedback slide, so if you would like to provide feedback to our Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion about this panel or future panels, that would be great. We have some like resource sheets in the back that have like different artists, books, TV shows, movies for all of the cultures that are represented up here that you can take a look at and bring with you. And I also have parking passes, so if you parked in our parking garage across the street, I have a pass so you can get out and not have to pay for that. So come up and find me and I'll give you one. Can we give a round of applause to our panelists?
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Have a good rest of your day.